Lead it off, Ashley.
Well, thanks for coming, everyone. We figured, the last few years how challenging it's been. It's shifted, but still a seller's market, obviously. Just, new ways to kind of come together and mastermind and figure out how to have all of our buyers, specifically our potential buyers, find success in this market. So we kind of are going to lead it more like a mastermind discussion based. We're all going to talk about what works for us, what we've seen. We're going to lead it based off the buy side, but also talk about the list side and see, like what listing agents do, within our office see. Just because I feel like, we try different things, but listing agents see the totality of it from other offices. So we're kind of going to report just like the objections we see, different conditions and strategies kind of went in this market for specifically our first time buyers.
Yeah, and we're also lucky to have Mark Casamassina from NJ Lender. So anybody who hasn't had the opportunity to work with Mark yet, Mark is fantastic about getting the deal every step of the way, from that first time you call him for the pre-approval all the way to getting the buyer into that closing. Had the chance to work with Mark a few times, and it's always a great experience. And we thought it would be great to have him from the lender's perspective kind of share some ideas, because I think oftentimes in this market, in any market really, we as agents can do a certain amount, and it's really great to have a strong partner in the lending side that can really help position your offer to be the one that gets accepted rather than one that's sitting on the reject pile. So Mark is gonna kind of chime in as we go, but any leading thoughts?
I'm gonna kind of follow your lead, and then we'll add and subtract from there.
Cool. So yeah, we thought basically what we would do for today is lead off by kind of throwing up, not throwing up, but tossing any objections that you're hearing from buyers right now as to why they might not be pulling the trigger to either get their home search started, or the buyer that's out there looking at houses, but when it comes time to pull the trigger and actually write an offer, they're kind of still pushing back with some objections. We also want to identify some of the conditions you guys might be facing, right? So when we think of the difference between these two, think of conditions more so as, hey, with rates where they are right now, like we physically feel like we just can't make a home purchase happen, right? They've been priced out of their desired type of home because interest rates are where they are, making their monthly payment unobtainable. So this is stuff that you might not be able to control directly, but we might be able to like expand that home search for them or do something different to help them along. And then obviously we're going to apply a bunch of strategies through our conversation today. So lead it off. Who's got some objections or conditions that you've been facing out there?
Yeah, so I'll help you. So people will say to me, I'm waiting for the market to go down. Prices are too high, I'm gonna wait for the market to go down.
Okay.
Right? Interest rates are too high, I'm gonna wait for rates to go down.
Yeah.
I'm saving money because I don't have 20% down. That's an objection. I'm repairing my credit. My credit's not good enough.
I think that the homes on the market.
Not the inventory.
Got burned too many times, don't want to go back out there.
Lost too many bids, too
Yeah.
competitive, too many buyers out there.
Right.
Those are the most that I hear.
Yeah, when we say too competitive, the word I hear a lot is bidding war. I don't want to face a bidding war.
I've seen the same where people assume like, I'm not gonna get it, I don't even wanna bother,
Mhm.
but it's not always the best, it's not always the highest price that wins, it always depends on what the seller's really looking for. So terms are always important too.
I always take that term bidding war out of their vocabulary. It's not a bidding war, it's multiple offers. And in this market, it's controlled multiple offers where it's the fairest it's ever been.
Mhm.
So it kind of get rid of that term.
Everybody's on an open playing
Yeah.
field.
I think we made a good point about the terms, what the seller wants. So I think really having good communication with the listing agent on what they're looking for. And talking to your clients if that would work for them, to try and get your offer with the terms that are.
Why should I have a mortgage of 3%? Why should I get a new one that's 7% of my annual?
Okay, so the second time home buyer who's saying, why would I buy with, again, interest rates too high? And I'm already locked in at a low rate, so. That's definitely a good one.
How do you answer that? Do you get involved with, well, tell me about your obligations, what are your goals, and where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you strike a conversation?
Well, no, I actually, that's a problem that I'm looking for a real solution, not
Got it.
just, yes, around it.
So when I'm presented with that, I'll start talking to people about their debts. Their obligations, what are their bills? And they may find that when they move up in home, they're gonna take some of that equity and eliminate some of their bills, so even though rates may be a little bit higher today. When they pay off all their bills, they're actually saving money per month from where they were, even though they're buying a bigger house. Because they eliminated all their debt. So you took some of their equity, paid off their debt. To offset the difference in the payment,
Yeah. like,
and
yeah,
net, they're spending less money per month,
That's great, that's
Yeah.
great.
That's a good
That's
point.
excellent.
so.
Yeah, it's a good.
That's a gold star.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's what you did for one of my clients, Helen. She took money to pay off her debt. She took money to put down payment on her new down rate size purchase. And then she still had the same payment, but now less debt.
And she had the bigger home
Yeah.
that her family wasn't busting out of the seams. and-
Yeah, well, it was the right size.
Yeah.
She moved down, like she got
She
onto
downsized.
one level. She had a 3-level town. She moved down to the first level, like, in the neighborhood, she wanted everything perfect, but she paid down all her debt.
Cool.
Did you mention pre-appraising the home? For
Good.
the offer, how you done?
So, yeah, I guess that's a solution strategy.
Yeah,
Alright, so NJ lenders, and I can't speak for every lender out there, we can offer what's called value assurance in certain cases. Where we pre-flight the value before your client makes the offer to help them with. Something up there you wanna also talk about, what if the house doesn't appraise that I'm buying? So a lot of people are concerned about.
Or.
What if the house doesn't appraise? How do I buy the house? And we try to cut that off at the pass. So when they're presenting their offer, they already know their options. And in some cases, I can give them value assurance. And I can give them, hey, no matter what it appraises for, you're okay. The cost, the expenses I made. If the property fits our program for that. But a lot of clients are concerned about, a lot of first time home buyers. They have 20% down, and I get this all the time. They have 20% down and the house under appraises, I have to come out of pocket with more money. No, they don't. They just have to pay PMI insurance. They can still put down the same amount of money, but I say this in this room. I have realtors that say it all the time and I'm like saying, you're so wrong, and I can't say that to them that direct, but because they don't understand finance. And they don't understand that, well, if they're putting down 20% and the house under appraises by 5%, all they do is pay PMI for 4 or 5 years. And the PMI may only be that somebody I spoke to yesterday was $21 a month for 5 years. So what did it cost them over 5 years? $1,250? You know, but that's understanding. I respectfully said everybody in this room, and everybody, I always hear sometimes stay in your lane. But my recommendation would be understand mortgage language and how it works. Even if you're not guiding somebody, you can direct them to get the right answer from the mortgage professional, you know.
This will be our next class.
For a condition, is anybody working with first time home buyers who are currently renting and might be in a lease, right? So would that be something we have to?
Yeah, I get that too. I'm not ready to buy now. My lease is up in 9 months.
Alright, I feel like we've got a good amount and we'll possibly get more as we go here, but I feel like what we wanted to do was kind of do a deep dive on each of these, right? And really see so I guess we'll start right off the bat, right, with objection number 1. Prices are too high. You get that objection, how are you gonna handle it? If we got a good objection handler for that one?
What if they go higher?
Just say that.
Yeah.
So I show people the history of real estate. And I show them, well, a year ago, this same house was selling for 600 and now it's listed for 650. So, yeah, we hear that rates are gonna come down and values are gonna come down, but they've been saying that for 2 years now. And even if they do go down, because they're excited, I don't wanna pay too much, because it's got to be worth more. My next question is, well, how long do you see yourself in the home for? Are you gonna be in the home for 1 year? Or do you see this as a home for 20 years, or maybe your forever home? And if they say to me 15, 20 forever home, well, what's the value gonna be then? Do you have any idea? No. Well, then, does it really matter what the value what happens to the value in year 2 of ownership, year 5 of ownership, if your plans are to be there for 20 years? Right? Because what's the value gonna be in 20 years? We don't know. If we knew that, we'll be in Atlantic City playing craps and picking number 20 every time when it comes up and win, right? We can see the future. We can't see the future, but you look at history, and history today tells you that the values are higher today than they were a year ago. So anybody that waited 1 year to buy, the rates are 0.75% higher and the values are 10% higher. Give me the stats on that, but I know they're higher. So.
Yeah, and I think that's price is too high. I love the question back to the client of like, well, what would you do if they went up higher? Because then it's the open ended. Now they have to start like turning their brain around and thinking about, well, what if that did happen, right? Pete, have you had like a real life scenario where that played out, and how did the client kind of?
I think we're all seeing it right now, right? People who waited last year or people who were on the fence. I have one client in particular who was just not comfortable with the values and the rates at the time, and now values and rates have gone up. And so I use her as an example. I tell that story all the time because that's what you should be doing, is telling stories of other people who are in that situation. And I think something that I do too is like I use very awesome finger analogy. Like I kind of represent it this way, and I say, listen, if home values are here and interest rates were here, when interest rates went up and we still saw home values come up, what do you think is going to happen when interest rates come down? They're going to go back up. So what are we waiting for? Good stuff.
And I think with prices too high, it's important to also pivot the conversation. I think, Mark, you were alluding to this, is that idea that, yeah, like homeownership isn't a 1 year decision in most cases, right? I mean, occasionally people do buy a house and then a year later decide to make a life change, but like when you're buying a house, you're typically looking at it. And so asking a person, well, let me ask you, like, regardless of where the prices are at today, like how long do you intend to be in your home? And then going with history and looking back as far as, so let's say they said, hey, 10 years, we want to be in the home. Grab the actual appreciation over the last 10 years and say, if you wait, are you willing to miss out on the opportunity to take advantage of that appreciation? Right?
And one thing I heard recently too, is like, people don't buy and sell homes for the most part for financial reasons, right? Your investors aside, people buy and sell homes for lifestyle reasons, upsizing, downsizing, better schools, those kinds of things. So if we don't know what that is, how can we help them, decide if not everybody is built for this market right now, I think.
Yeah.
And I think focusing on those things is more important than the money aspect. Obviously, money's important.
Yeah, and I think that also ties into a little bit just like the condition of realizing that, because I know personally, like I'm sure everybody in this room has had those moments this year where it's like you're just very frustrated and at your wit's end. And yet I was talking to my coach one day, and like the realization was that I was trying to squeeze something out of my pipeline that just wasn't there. So Pete's point about, you are going to have people that the condition matches that they might feel like they just have been priced out of this market, and that's okay. Like it's okay for people to be renters, and it's our job as real estate agents to not come at them with that commission breath and be just looking at it as, the transaction, but like, all right, like we might end up with some buyers in our pipeline who the conditions are such that maybe it is just best for them to continue renting or keep saving money. There might be different options for them to look into, but I think it's important for us as agents to always be looking forward at who can we help today, and if we can't be trying to force something that's not there. So
And if they're a renter, well, you get paid to help them get into a new rental.
Yeah.
So they may be your renter client for life.
and then I think that also I had made a note of financial undereducation. I think that person who might want to tap out of the market right now, we can do our best to, overcome objections, but that's where we want to also include this conditions category. Because again, conditions might exist where if it's better for that person to continue to rent or rent a bigger home. For their own family purposes, we want to stay in their life and make sure that we continue to financially educate them on. It's a huge opportunity for us to really add value to that person and say, hey, it's okay if now's not the time. In the interim, let's work on saving up more money, or, we now know some more of the objections and conditions that cause that person to not be able to buy. But stay in their life and keep helping them.
And also like with the education, that's building like extra trust with the clients. They don't like how Scott mentioned the commission rep. They may feel like, okay, they're pushing me to want to buy a house and spend this money that I don't either want to or have. The education aspect is just kind of like, hey, I'm just here as a resource. Ask any questions, build the trust, and maybe they're not ready, but they may like the way you talk about things or explain things, and they'll pass you along to someone else. Friend or family. So I think that's also something to keep in mind too.
Yeah.
It's huge.
What do we think? We're pretty good on prices too high?
Say one thing. 10 years ago, we used to do flips and stuff. We used to think buying a fixer upper for 45,000 was too high, because we used to get them for like 28, 30, all in, lawyer fees, everything. So it's just like the times have changed. So yeah, like, but now if I saw a fixer upper for 45,000, I would, oh my God,
I
yeah.
think if you're competing against
Yes.
one another,
Yeah.
well,
Now I'm saying that to sell for like 100, 150, 200 for the same fixer upper we paid 30,000 for it. So it's just a matter of just the times are different.
and I think that's also, Pete mentioned storytelling, and like, as we're talking today, guys, like, absorb some of what everyone's saying, and whether you use it as an example of, hey, someone in my office used to flip homes and was sharing how back in the day, you used to be able to do it for 45,000. Create those stories, because people do listen to stories and they understand them better than just you trying to spew facts at them. And that's when sometimes we can come across as like that pushy salesperson, right? But if we tell stories about other people who've been in their shoes, that one reminded me of like price is too high. I have a client specifically looking in Highland Lakes, and her experience is she grew up there. So to her, home values now being 350, 400, 450, 500 for homes that she's used to seeing growing up be the $70,000 home, the $120,000 home. She cannot yet wrap her head around the fact that times have changed, and it's interesting trying to like explain like, hey, like, but that's a great story. I might have to share with her, like,
Yeah, you said like that, she probably thought like it was 75 and now it's 105 or whatever, and she probably thought, oh, it's so high back then, but just.
yeah. And when people have those personal experiences, they become very latched to them because they've witnessed it, right? So when we can share other people's stories, it helps to kind of normalize the situation and say, hey, I've got somebody who is just like you, who, got used to being able to flip homes at, $45,000 acquisition, and now they're having to pay 200 for that very same home. And yet they're still out there flipping, or whatever you want, fit the story to their version of it, but.
I took one of Jeff Otto, I don't know if I'm always saying his name right, is it right, that right, Julia, Jeff Otto, right?
Sounds right.
Okay, so he was saying that, and Kina, right, he was saying that typically homes in New Jersey are going 5% up each year in prices. So when somebody says, I wanna wait, prices are too high, a lot of times what I do is I say, okay, they're high now, but, and then I give them that little statistic, and they're like, oh. So you can always throw that in there too, so some people like data,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And that's also an important point too, I think, in this market, or any market really, is trying to understand how the person that you're dealing with best understands information, right? There's visual learners, there's auditory learners, people that love stats and data versus people that need to like see and feel something. So really identifying how that person communicates is helpful in
And also
overcoming objections.
if they go by, like, some people are more pain reactive or pleasure reactive, like you get to do, X, Y, and Z with your family, you get to have the pool, you get to have, all your cousins and relatives come, or is it, if you don't get this, you're gonna be spending X dollars more? Like, some people are motivated by either the painful aspect of waiting or the pleasure aspect, so also finding that out, to what's their motivating factor.
Totally. So on to the next one, 20% down.
So, anyone have any?
That's smart.
Yeah, so I'll talk to people and, well, I don't have 20% to put down yet. And what you could buy a home with as little as 3% down, there may be some 100% financing programs down. The state offers some down payment assistance programs. So there's options for your clients to buy with less than 20% down, but I do hear that. From people, they wanna get the 20% down, cause I don't wanna pay PMI. They don't even know how much PMI costs, but they just think it's a bad thing, or I don't wanna go FHA. Does it really matter, you know, really what your payment is, can you afford it? And it's just, you know, when the client says, yeah, I can't buy with less than 20% down, just let them know there's many options. And, you know that there's options where maybe they can do no money down, but be prepared to put down something, and usually it's 3% or more,
Can you talk about the assistant?
the down payment assistance.
Yes.
So there's income limitations to it, upwards of around $150,000 a year in income. And in our area, the state will give you up to $15,000 in what's referred to as down payment assistance. So if your client's buying a house for $300,000 and they're doing the version of it where the minimum down payment is 3%, that's $9,000 goes towards your down payment, and then the other $6,000 can be applied towards their closing piece.
That's a grant.
It's a grant. So it is repayable, after, it's repayable within a certain amount of years, I believe it's 5 years. After that period of time, they wouldn't have to repay it. So, but it is a grant.
And then are there any conditions when they sell the home?
It depends on when they sell it. If
Okay.
that grant is to be paid back or it's forgiven.
Okay,
It's a time frame. It's 5 years usually.
okay,
You said that's income restricted?
It's income restricted, yes.
less than 150.
150 for, around 150 for the one product, but it's around in the 130s
A couple.
family.
Okay,
And I don't have all the guidelines with me on it, so I don't wanna,
yeah.
just, if you have somebody making less than 150, we can see if they fit it.
Mhm.
Cool. Let me memorize those guidelines.
And you would help them with that, or is
Yeah.
that something they have to do with?
No, we do it, we do it,
Okay.
yeah.
And in your experience, Mark, and anybody, really, but what do you find is the number one reason why people feel they do need a 20% down payment? Is it just? lack of-
Uneducated.
Okay,
Lack of information. You know, the old school, maybe their parents had just put down 20% because that's all they knew. Many years ago, there was no such thing as PMI.
Mhm.
So somebody who's older may think, well, you only can buy a house with 20% down because that's the only way that you can buy a house. But that's 30+ years ago, 40 years ago, possibly, so I think it's outside of it. If they're talking to an older couple, they may say you have to put down 20%, not realizing you can do it with less money down.
So then flip that to the listing side now, when you get multiple offers, and there are some with 3% down, 5% down, 20 and 40. Usually the seller wants to go for more of a percentage down. You know what I mean? So that's where the appraisal waiver comes in, that won't matter what they have being put down, because the down payment doesn't matter as much. So that's where you need better terms in order to get that lower down payment accepted.
Yeah, I can say this, you guys can't say it, but if your clients are working with, say, those online companies. I know listing agents look at who the lender is, and it makes a difference. Because you wanna have an idea of who that appraiser is going out to their property.
So we say that, we're not allowed to say that.
Well, I don't know, I don't know, that's why I said I'm not sure, but my point is. Yeah, and I don't care if FHA or 3% down or 20% down, I look up the value, if the value's there, the value's there, they look, the appraisers look at the same comparables. Doesn't matter, the appraiser doesn't care what the down payment is. They're looking at the sales of that home. So we do our due diligence sometimes before the offer's presented to get a feel for, hey, are we gonna be okay with the appraisal?
So, in combination with like a lower down payment and a strategy. One of the things that, as a listing agent, we like to see is, or working with the buyers, is to like just front load that down payment. Put it all up right up front, so there's more skin in the game. So you're not putting down like, $2,000 and you bring the rest to the closing table, and you just front load it. I would do 75% down and bring the rest to the closing table, so it looks better, it does, knowing that the buyer has more skin in the game.
And I would tell you to encourage your buyers, encourage every buyer whether they're 3% down or 40% down, to get their mortgage paperwork in, income documents, asset documents into the lender so they can be credit approved, whereas the pre-approval letter is one step even better, it's credit approved, only subject to the appraisal. And now you just make them look that much more of a serious buyer, but that has to come from you. That's the education process when you're interviewing your buyer that has all these reservations about, oh, the market's too competitive, it's this, it's that, I don't wanna get in a bidding war. Well, how can you make that buyer as strong as possible when they're presenting their offer? Well, number one is education, understanding if a house doesn't appraise. Like you said, you take bidding war out of the conversation because you term it a different, you use different, yes. But it's your presentation to your buyer and then helping them understand the importance of getting credit approved. Getting your paperwork into the lender, because I'm not ready to buy yet, I'll do it when I'm ready, and I'm like, okay, so I get to pay some in the W-2. I can't twist their arm, but you can. I don't wanna upset them in the early stages of the process when you refer them to me. But if part of your initial consultation is talking about this and how important it is, now when I say it to them, they're very receptive. But I don't wanna upset them when I'm meeting them the first time, and they're nervous already to give me their paperwork, so.
Yeah, it's a fine line with first-time home buyers between being too pushy and giving too much information. It's a little bit of hand-holding and educating slowly and earning their trust, because you don't wanna sell them the first thing. You want to educate them and have them buy the right thing.
Yeah, just as far as the 20% down thing, I mean, what I found with like all of my buyers is kind of what Mark said, like, it's the lack of education. They think PMI is hundreds of dollars every single month. And a lot of times it's not. And so I think that conversation is first you ask, well, what is it about 20% down that's important? See what they say, and then say, okay, cool. Well, if I could show you a way that you actually, get an idea of what that payment would look like, would that be helpful? And a lot of times when you show them it's $100 or $70, whatever it is, they're like, oh, wow, okay, that's not so bad. And then you can go into those other conversations about, less money for appraisals and down payments and all that other kind of stuff. So
And
that's
also,
in my experience right now.
also adding to that, when it comes to switching from maybe 20% to 5% down, and when you explain the difference where maybe it's only like $75 a month then versus, hey, you're saving maybe $10,000, $15,000, you can still have your house only an extra, less than $100 a month, but you could still go on that vacation, you could still invest it in something, they still have that actual cash to do other things.
Good stuff.
I kind of think it's off topic though, because we're trying to get the first time home buyers offer accepted. And having them go down in their down payment isn't
Well,
really.
So this would be if they I think their objection is they're not gonna buy a house until they have 20%. And so I would also say, like, I feel like a lot of this is circling back to also, when we get a new buyer, what should be our first step with that buyer? Buyer's consult, right? That's our opportunity to do all of this education, and now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I'm wondering if I'm doing a good enough job, like asking, not necessarily giving them fears and objections they didn't already have, but making sure that I'm like pulling all of that info out of them ahead of time so that we're not going through the process with them having that little thing in the back of their head
So
that's
that was
saying,
the objective.
yeah, so
Okay,
the
I was looking
objection
at it
is.
over here. Yeah. I was looking at it. Over here, okay.
So yeah, 20% down, how about, I can't buy a house, my credit's too low.
Well, Mark.
So like we say, it's important to have a good relationship with.
Yeah, so when they're concerned about their credit, I say, okay, well, it's like you're going to the doctor. My knee hurts. I may need surgery. Well, you need to get an MRI first, right? So the credit report's the MRI. So I'm gonna delicately talk to about, so well, let's see what we can do. And there's things we could do to maybe improve your credit, but the first thing I need to do is see it. And then we can talk about how we can improve your credit, how we can get your scores up. I recently took a loan last week, the scores were 590s. But I gave a pre-approval letter, and they signed a contract on the house and their offers accepted,
Nice.
And we are improving their credit because I did what I had to do to tell them what they needed to do. And I'm confident in my experience that their scores are gonna go to where they need to be, that they're gonna be able to close on the home in 45 to 60 days. So that's what we do is we consult them with their credit, we guide them and walk them through the steps necessary to maybe get from, hey, my credit's a little low, that, hey, you're still able to get a mortgage.
Mhm.
You're able to still get financing. And you're able to still buy your dream home. And move forward. So it's, everything we do is presentation. You know, you pick their brain, learn a little bit about your client, ask them questions. You know, I don't tell somebody what they're qualified for. I start out by saying, all right, great. So we've been on the phone now for about 7 minutes. And we start joking a little bit, we start laughing. I said, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what you're trying to do. What's your objective? What's your comfort zone? Where do you see yourself? What price range are you think you're in? How much money do you want to put down? I'm just picking their brains. I still didn't even get into the numbers with it yet. Because that helps me know how to control the conversation. Because I am going to control the conversation, but I need to learn a little bit about your client before I can control the conversation. And then get them to where they need to be. And help them go from point A to point B. So you have to make a friend first, right? With your first time home buyers. And then when you're presenting the offer, if you made that friend, they start listening to you more about all your strategies.
So Mark, can I ask a question? If you have somebody that is, they're going through a bank, right? And you're like, okay, well, let's talk to some local. And one of their objections is, I don't want them to open up my credit again. I don't. What do we do with that?
Alright, so it's a great question. So first, there's a hard pull and there's a soft pull with credit.
Okay,
The first thing I'm gonna tell you is somebody running their credit and they're applying for a mortgage or they're shopping for a home. Think about it when you all shop for a car. You go to different dealerships, right?
Mhm.
Your credits ran a couple different times, correct? Did your scores go down? No. What happens is it's the term I use, it's a shopping clause. It's the same industry. So when a mortgage company runs your credit and then another mortgage company runs your credit, your score stays the same for the most part. If they start saying, well, my score is 760 and the mortgage company told my score is 680, it's because the consumer credit reports use a different scoring model than what the mortgage industry uses. But running your credit doesn't lower your scores. Not paying your bills does. Collection accounts do. Being overextended on debt does, right? That's gonna affect your credit score. Running your credit, maybe it goes down a point or two, but it doesn't go down 20, 30, 40 points. It doesn't.
okay,
Otherwise, nobody would ever run their credit,
right,
right?
right.
But that's the misconception out there.
Okay,
Now, you're asking, well, they're with a bank, how do you get them to go to maybe one of your local lenders? Well, you have to provide a value.
exactly.
What's the value that my local lender can give you?
Mhm.
And you have to have what may fit, like I did recently with your office. We came out with something called value assurance.
Mhm.
Well, I had some of your agents that their clients were pre-approved through these online vendors. And they brought the value, he may be able to help you waive your appraisal. It may be in your best interest to at least have a conversation with him and learn more about that. So you gave them a value to speak to me. If you just say, talk to my guy.
Yeah.
In the first consultation. You still have to give a value then even too, right?
Right.
And that's, again, what we do. It's how we present anything. Like when you guys present an offer, you're talking about how to make it stronger. Well, I'm gonna tell you that you wanna have a credit approval, right? Well, who's gonna be the attorney to use it? Don't you wanna know as a listing agent who the attorney is on the other side?
Mhm.
Who's their home inspector?
Yeah.
Who they use as a home inspector? Maybe you can have their attorney give the review letter when they present the offer. Did you ever think of that? Have the attorney give the review letter. Now they know what they're dealing with on the other side. It's generic language, right? In most cases. But all these little things matter when you're presenting the offer. And then everybody's gonna say, are they gonna waive the appraisal? Well, if they get hit with that after they present their offer, they're nervous. What do you mean waive the appraisal? What's an appraisal gap? But if you have that conversation up front and they know what the answers are, they're not intimidated by it when they present the offer. What if the house under appraised? What does it cost me? Well, let's get on the phone and go over it. And we go over the options. Because we talked about PMI, but there's ways to buy out the PMI as well. And if the client fits that, we can go over that with them and help them see, oh, my payment only went up by $30 a month. That's it. The house comes in at what the house is listed for, not what I pay for it based on my down payment. That's all that happens. Oh, I'm okay with that. As long as your client's okay with paying more money for the house than what it appraises for, then the conversations, you can control that conversation, but you have to understand what their temperature is, what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. You know, so and sometimes you have to present an offer knowing you're not gonna get it, but you have to get them in the game. Right? You have to get them to see it and feel it and understand what you're saying. So I guess I hear everything, so I just, sorry.
That's, I feel like a therapist.
Yeah.
You just said, even though you may know that your offer is not going to get accepted. It's really important that your buyers see how you work, and it's almost like they're watching you to see how this process goes, and it's almost like a dry run, test run, and you are writing it up and you're going for the whole you're going through the motions knowing that it's not gonna get accepted. And you absolutely manage their expectations, you let them know that there's multiple offers and this is what we're looking at, and but that's really important, I think. Back to, how do you talk to your people during buyer's consult? And you don't want to like throw all this information on them, but you have to be able to read your audience, know who you're talking to. Are you talking to an analytic? Are you talking to somebody that is just like, okay, great, let's get started, and if they're asking questions, then it's almost like a 9-year-old, if they're asking questions about, a certain topic, you give them what they're asking. Same thing with the buyers, like they'll ask questions and then you provide their answers, but you don't want to overdo it and scare them. I did that one time. Because you just want them to know everything, but they'll learn the process first. It's gonna take a couple of times before you write it, before your offer is gonna get accepted. So it helps you get to know them and how they're gonna respond.
Sometimes they ask me a question and I ask them. I says, well, and I try to phrase it in a way where I want to answer your question right. Can you ask me? Can I ask you, why are you asking me that question? Where are you coming from with that? To try to get a little bit more out of them without answering them, but I'm wording it in a way where I don't want to say I'm pretending that I'm caring, because that's the wrong word, but I'm trying to get more out of them to really give them the answer they're looking for, because they're testing you. So you have to test them back. And even though you're having this conversation, you have your consultation, you have everything you want to talk to them about, it all doesn't have to be accomplished in that 5-minute phone call. It can be the follow-up call that you're going to touch on that. What do they do for a living? Where do they work? What's their commute? You may want to learn that, but that may not be the first call. That may be the second call, because they're looking to buy here. Learn a little about what they do for a living. Because you said analytical person. Well, I can tell you, anytime you have an engineer, they want to know it to the penny. Paying the buffer. What are the closing fees? I don't think I can call your attorney. You know what I mean? But they're about this. Well, can you give me something more exact? I can, but I can't, because your attorney handles it and it's all tied to the day you close and this, that, but you help them understand it and then they get it. But you have to make a friend. I think that's the first part in what we all do for a living, is you have to make a friend, right? And you have to connect with them in some way and be a storyteller. I talk a lot about myself and my experiences. So now they really feel comfortable because they're getting to know my personal experiences. And I don't have any shame. I don't, listen, I bought real estate and lost, and I bought real estate and won. And I'll share that with people, So I'm divorced and I'm remarried. So if I talk to somebody who's divorced, I've walked in their shoes. I don't get in depth, but they can relate to you then, right? You're a person.
And I think something you just said, Mark, there is really important with any objection. I mean, literally any objection, not even just the ones we have up here, is to ask that clarifying question when they throw something at you of like, that's a great question. And like, what's important about that to you? Because you're right, you could go ahead and answer the question the way you think they want it, like in your head, you're like, oh, well, here's the answer. And yet you might not even be actually answering the question they're seeking. So just an important clarification there. I do want to make sure we have time to cover strategies. So I guess we Yeah, well, I guess, objections are low inventory and too competitive. I think those are tied together pretty closely, right? So like. The person that's not even willing to take that first step into the market right now, how are we helping them? Overcome the objection of, well, there's just not any houses out there. There's no houses, right? And we're, afraid of the competition.
Something I've been telling people is I'm prospecting every day on behalf of my clients, so I just wanna know what you're looking for, so that if I come across that, would you wanna know about that? Well, yes, I would. Okay, great. So let's do the right thing. Let's get you in touch with a lender. If that opportunity does show up, I can make sure that I can bring it to you and bring you to the seller with confidence. And you just start getting a list of just what are people looking for? What are people looking for? And when you're having conversations every day, you're just pairing stuff together.
Did anybody in the room ever implement Bill's awesome strategy of? All right, we got some hands getting raised up. Pete and Julia, you want to combine to share with us what you guys are doing with the Cobb system?
Yeah, so, I mean, both letters work for me. So when I'm talking to buyers in their consultation, and I go like that Cobb, like, that's in my buyer's consultation. And I'll say, if we can't find you something, you identify neighborhood, and I'll send out letters for you. We're gonna get you a property, we'll find you something. And I like to say that I wanna create inventory where there is, that's what my job is. And that's what I'm trying to find for you, the house that you want, in the neighborhood that you want. And we're gonna turn over every stone that there is, and then I talk about what we have here and how we're always sharing exclusive listings and how we're very collaborative. I just go down the whole, I start with the collaboration and why that's important, stuff about that. But yeah, so the golden letters work and they're great, and I highly recommend them. I know you've done them too. Right?
Yeah, golden letters, circle prospecting, pretty much what I say is we can be like everybody else and wait for a home to come out on the market and compete with everybody else. Or we can, get together, we commit to each other, have a loyalty agreement in place. And we'll prospect on your behalf every day, and as soon as an opportunity comes up, we'll bring it to you. And then literally break it down, I call it the Cobb method, like I do the whole thing, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important to share with buyers, because then you're actually, again, bringing value to the table. You're not just like every other agent out there, and you could even say, you're right, many agents out there are still stuck just working with the inventory that's available on the MLS. Can I share with you what I do differently? Right now, you're giving yourself that teed up opportunity to share what you do differently, and you gotta go do something different, but
I think that becomes an objection handler for, oh, there's too many bidding wars, too many this, too many that. Like, well, then you just say, well, if I could show you a way to get into a house with maybe not having to do that, would you be interested? Of course they would. And then you find that they're really motivated, what they're motivated by, and then that becomes an attached buyer too, so.
And I just also plug for, again, I just think one of the things that does make our office so incredibly special is the opportunity, right? Like, so I almost recently lost a listing because and it was a good moment for me to identify that the other agent kind of bragged about her status as a top 5 agent in the office. But then I was like, oh, that's phenomenal for her. That sounds great. And what I found out was her office has 30 people in it. So it's a lot easier to be a top 5 agent. So the seller was basically saying have you ever been top 5 in your office? And I'm like, oh my God, well, I got 300 agents to compete against, but we also collaborate together, right? And that's the key component and what makes this so much different. Right, Pete the other day called me and said, hey, I got something coming on in Bloomfield. If you've got anybody, give me a heads up. And similarly, I shared with him what I've got coming on. We've got that Facebook group, the collaboration is something that does not exist anywhere else at that level. And it really does set you apart when you're working, especially with a first-time home buyer who's fearing, they're hearing everybody else saying there's nothing out there, right?
Yeah, I want to add to that. So I've been doing this for 30 years. So when I first started in this industry, you didn't have cell phones and all of this stuff. So I had to go to real estate offices every single day to meet realtors. Now you can go on Facebook and you can be a friend with somebody, right? But my point is, 30 years ago, when I walked into a real estate office, every realtor that did it full time was in the office at 9 AM. And when you talk about collaboration, if you're not in here, you don't know what's going on out there. So either you're gonna have people you're gonna call every day to find out what's new coming on the market for them, right? Or you're gonna come into the office and hear the buzz that's going on. But if you're gonna stay home all day, the only person you're talking to is your dog or your family, right? So you need to come into you need to come into the office. I tell my loan officers, you wanna work from home, work from home. Well, I'm writing loans every day and they're not. What's the difference? Because they're getting distracted at home. I go to the office every single day. And I think that's, even if you come in 9 to 11 every day and you communicate with Pete and Ronnie and, hey, Tim, these guys, I'm looking at listers and Judy's a lister, you're a lister. Get anything new coming on the market, I have a buyer. You learn what's going on, plus you learn strategies now to talk to other people. Because your cat and dog don't tell you to talk to a client, right? And so I just stress that to you. And then also too, just going to, well, there's no inventory. If the inventory is low, well, how many homes have sold this year in the town of Wayne through the first half of the year?
184.
184. Have those answers. Well, if there's no homes for sale, how do we average 30 homes a month selling in Wayne? A home a day sells every day in Wayne. They don't know what sold in 2018 or 19. Maybe it was double that number in 18 or 19 halfway through the year. Maybe it was 300 instead of.
It was. They 808, I think it's 2021.
And that was an aberration year, so go back to when it wasn't, and you know, and I say that because like you compare 18, 19, but my point is houses sell every single day. And that's what you have to convey to your clients, houses sell every single day. So let's be in the game. You know, and let's get out there and let's see what's gonna happen.
Cool. So I think we've covered a lot of the objections, conditions got tied in there a little bit. I really do want to make sure we walk out of here with some like positioning opportunities, ways that we're getting offers accepted. Because that's that kind of last leg, right? We've prepared you to be able to handle some objections with your buyers, hopefully, you know, team up to Mark because he's the wealth of knowledge and learn your numbers like Tim out there because that's impressive.
But that's your job.
Yeah.
We are fact finding.
Because we're professionals in real estate, right? And you know the town. So if a client has a question about who should I go to get my roof done?
Yeah.
You're the professional in real estate. Have the answers, have the go-to people, right? Because they want to know what restaurant to go to in the town they just moved into. Know which one to send them to. Because you're a professional. You're a real estate professional, right? Sorry, guys.
I think Mark's gonna tie into this as well. So what are you guys doing out there? What have you found success with getting your offers accepted, right? And like Judy, before you mentioned, like how are you positioning an offer if you know your buyer has a low down payment? So that that's not the thing that gets them tossed into the reject pile.
You know, limiting inspections and sticking to it. We just recently received an offer for a townhome we had listed and the buyer's agent came in with limiting inspections and anything up to $2,500 in repair requests were taken care of by the buyer. That was fantastic. So they were giving $2,500 toward, and there was some mold that was found, $4,000, so the seller only had to contribute $1,500 of that.
And you could craft your offer to that. You could, like, if you're going in at 550, you can go in at, you know, 5,000 less than that and just kind of put that in your offer, just knowing that you're gonna give that, you know, and that, so, I don't know, as a seller, that goes a long way when they see something like that, you know, or do the smoke certification. Buyers do the smoke certification. The buyers can hire the cleaner. Before they, you know, before the block for.
We had one that they all could pay moving costs.
Well, they could pay moving costs, they could pay for the seller's attorney, they could pay the transfer tax, the seller's transfer tax.
I don't
You
know.
can, title costs are their own expense, they pay that no matter what. They're paying the seller side of expenses, which is their attorney fee, the transfer tax, like you said, moving expenses. You can get creative in how you present your offer, and that's net dollars to them, you know, how do you present it? Are you,
I had a buyer that was very concerned about giving up their inspection rights entirely, for an as-is property. Obviously, I recommended that fully. And I kind of worked away where they want an as-is house. I basically said, why don't we put a limit on, we say anything like you did, anything that is over $1,000 or over $2,000, correct it was, we will, we'll come back and renegotiate, but if it's not that, then we leave it. So basically, instead of saying major structural issues only, like everyone puts that, we basically said like, there's a cap to what we're willing to.
And be specific too, not an aggregate or individual items, like whatever that is, like being more specific, the better.
And so a question for like the agents that have been a lot on the listing side. How often would you say, let's say you've got multiple offers coming in, how often would you say the agents presenting the offers pick up the phone and call you before actually presenting?
I'm so glad you said that, cause like, it's really that simple sometimes, guys, like, pick up the phone and, like, Judy, I was gonna ask you, how many offers have you received where you never heard anything from the agent, don't know anything in the story, like, it's crazy.
Well, let's and ask what the seller's preference is for closing, any little thing like that. Have your contracts completely filled out, don't leave things blank. If there's 2 listing agents on it, ask whether you want both listing agents on the contract. I've gotten a couple of offers, which this person here, I'll cover up his name. But with the presentation, he has this whole thing spelled out.
So that's, cute.
It's fabulous.
That was like a PDF. Like,
I don't know, I want to give it to my Lisa, see if she can help us do
Is
that.
that from Christie's? Okay, oh, that's right, I got one.
Yeah, I got a couple of them, and then on the second one, with the offer, he wrote, oh, I'd love to work with Judy and Kathy again, like reminding me that we know him. Cause I didn't remember,
Okay,
so just little things like that, be thorough with your offer, communicate with the listing agent nicely.
Yeah.
Because if there are 3 offers with the same price, and I know that's gonna be a great agent to work with.
mhm.
so how many times do you get called by the buyer's agent before the offer's presented to pick your brain on not just closing dates and whatnot, but the expectation of your seller, what they're looking for, and
Yeah.
how can I put the offer together to suit their needs? That
Yeah.
you get that call as well, like learning what they're expecting to get for the house, right? Learn what are there offers on the property already?
Yeah.
How many offers are on that property already? I have a buyer very interested,
I also try to like make friends with the listing agent, just like you're making friends with your client, like you just kind of like find something and just go with it, and then they're, yeah, they just are happy to work with you.
100%.
Yeah.
It's like, we talk about building that relationship with the client, but I feel like sometimes we lose that connection between the other agent, and like. The same way you can make a client feel good and win them over is the same way you can do with an agent. I love the way you presented this. I love the photos you did here. I love the way you described this as that. I mean, we're human beings that feel
Yeah.
good, and that starts to
Right.
build that relationship. So even if there's just one little thing that they can give you that you can get a slight little edge over someone else, have that
And
conversation.
state, my buyers will be using this attorney who I use often and have a good relationship
know.
with. This mortgage person, and sometimes the mortgage person can reach out.
Yeah,
you said how many times?
Sorry, Mark, to add to that, what you said before, Judy, about, taking bidding war out of vocabulary. I did that recently with a client and they said, okay, so it's a blind auction with final investment. I'm like, yes, you're right, actually, which levels the playing field is more fair than, a bidding war
Right.
technically. But they were like, so what's the edge? And I had to be a little forward and I'm like, I'm the edge. I've spoken to the listing agent 5 times, we know exactly what they want, they like you already, you know what I mean? And so that communication takes care of a lot of those objections. And if you could display that up front, that's big.
And if you don't wind up winning that deal, you speak to the agent and say, you know what, please keep me in mind for backup, tell your clients.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
had
I
many
got-
of
yeah.
them, we were number 3, 4, or 5, and wound up getting a house a month later.
I just took a loan for somebody this morning.
touch.
They were 2 weeks ago, they lost, they were number 2. The seller and the current buyer, they're not working things out. They just got the offer accepted as a number 2 backup offer, because the buyer's agent kept following up with the listing agent
Mhm.
to see how it was going.
Mhm.
You know, so even though maybe you're number 2 or number 3. Stay in touch with that listing agent, hey, just make sure everything's going okay, were the inspections done, my client's still very interested in the home if something changes.
Mhm.
And now it doesn't go back on the market and you're
Yeah.
doing what do you call it?
Happiness.
No, you're doing the not bidding war, you have the word for it.
Multiple.
You're multiple offer, you're not getting yourself into a multiple offer situation again,
Yeah.
because they just go right to you.
Right,
I had that specifically happen with me, we were the second offer and they fell through because they wanted a bunch of different things on their inspection. And because I kept coming back and was asking about it, she actually specifically told the sellers to take our offer and, you know, or make a point to push our offer forward. And they ended up finishing with like 4 other offers that were all cash and higher, and she was like, well, we want to stick with you, like, we know you guys are working in good faith and all that stuff, so it's important to them that they knew who we were and were in close contact with them pretty regularly in between, when we were actually looking at the home and when it got accepted.
Because we all know that, getting a deal from point A to the closing table, right, it's a journey, right? And you don't want to be in that journey with another agent who doesn't even seem capable of getting you past the start line, right? I mean, I think my personal story was recently I had a listing with 14 offers. I think maybe 6 people reached out ahead of time to like let me know, ask questions about what the sellers were looking for. The highest offer that we ended up with on that, the guy didn't even touch base. I got the offer in my inbox. The price was the best, but the terms like totally mismatched what my seller was looking for. And I called him and I said, hey, just a heads up, like your price is great here. You just gotta work on the terms. Never called me back, never changed the terms. And when we sat down with the seller, I said, listen, like this is a great offer price wise, but nothing else really matches up to what you guys are looking for. We took a lower offer because somebody else matched what they were looking for.
Plus it shows that the agent's not responsive.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I didn't even get a call back. Like,
Well,
that's
Hey,
terrible.
Scott, let me ask you a question. As a listing agent, do you put a list of how to submit an offer, what you're asking for when you submit an offer?
yeah, that's a great call, right? I mean, looking for the documents that are posted in the MLS, right? A lot of agents are doing that nowadays. Posting exactly what those terms are so that as the listing agent side of it, they know, they're busy, right? And so if they're answering the same question over and over, if they're proactive, they can post that right on the MLS. So look in the documents and see, are there offer instructions right there? I would say, yeah.
For the strategies, I have a couple in mind, but one of the things that has gotten our offer accepted twice is in the offer email that I sent, we break it down, we have the terms and what's included in the package. I bold it and I say we are open to negotiating any of these terms. And so when they're looking at multiple offers and, ours might be neck and neck with like 2 or 3 others, and they call me, they're like, well, I'm like, but we're open to negotiate, and well, my offer was accepted, price didn't matter.
And where do you put that, Julia?
So I have an email on it, Ryan, I have to send it to you, Ryan, I never sent it to you, if you're asking for it, I have an email that I just kind of break down everything, and then I highlight it in the email letter, and then I attach the documents to it. Awesome. Yeah, that actually is a, Bill Boswell. And you, I would like describe it there that we shared, and it has worked.
I like it.
And then the other thing is, we offer to remove any items left in the house that the seller doesn't want to throw out, take care of.
We meaning you or the buyer?
The buyer, we said, the buyers will say, well, whatever you want to leave in the house, we'll get rid of. And if somebody's downsizing, if, my buyers are new buyers and they like some of the picture that you keep it or throw it out or whatever, but it just gives the seller like less stress.
Yeah.
That they don't have to worry about removing everything in the house, especially senior citizens.
Yes.
That's a big thing for seniors.
We have a listing like that in Wayne now where the buyer said that, and I think they're going to be sorry.
So I was gonna ask that.
exception, like we're not moving pool tables or big cabinets, you know, like.
And another little clarification to that is to say that it's existing personal items, right? So you don't wanna say any personal items, and then all of a sudden you got Uncle Joe and Aunt Chip bringing over all their crap and bugs and stuff. Like, yeah. Luckily, didn't learn that lesson the hard way, but I thought of it ahead of time, so.
That's a very good point.
Mark, you mentioned before paying the New Jersey Realty transfer tax. I feel like that's a really key one that we kind of glossed over, so like, how does that set someone apart and what does that actually mean?
Well, the transfer tax on an average sale is anywhere from $3,000 to say $6,000 in this area. So that's $3,000 to $6,000 in the seller's pocket. That your offer is technically better than another offer that's at the same price.
Is that scaled because of the purchase price?
It's scaled off the purchase price, yeah. Because every seller pays a transfer tax to the state of New Jersey. And if you picked up the seller's cost up to a certain dollar amount. That could be a sales pitch too, how you separate yourself, you know?
And do I understand correctly that because they're paying for it with cash, it's not actually impacting like the appraisal value? So if it's a $500,000 offer and we're paying the New Jersey Realty transfer tax, so technically you're bumping your offer up to, let's say the tax was 5,000, your offer now is 505, but for appraisal purposes, we still just have to appraise it.
No, the contract price is the contract price, it's just net to the seller.
Yeah. So the seller nets more money without risking that extra little bit of, you know, appraisal issue.
Is it like a concession to the seller then?
Yeah, it's a buyer's closing fee, so in new construction. Sometimes the buyer pays the transfer tax. So it's a closing fee to the buyer.
Okay.
You know, like when I disclose a file, if I don't put the transfer tax on the disclosures, the what's called the loan estimate. And the buyer was responsible to pay it, and I didn't put it on the paperwork, I have to pay it. Because I didn't include it on their loan estimate, so. You know,
And now,
it comes out of their pocket,
And the reason I asked that clarification was because so the first time I ever saw that on an offer was a real life scenario where two offers that came in on the listing were identical, basically penny for penny everything, except one included that clause. And I spoke to the lender who the buyer was working with, and I just said, hey, is this paid in cash? Because it was the first time I had ever seen it. And so the cool thing there was we were starting to worry about like, wow, we're getting a number that like, I'm not sure the appraisal is gonna work on this, but we knew we had two identical offers and one was setting themselves apart by probably, again, in that situation, it was like an extra $5-6 grand in the seller's pocket.
Yeah, it comes out of the seller, it comes out of the buyer's checkbook.
okay.
It doesn't.
Buyer-
It comes out of the buyer's checkbook, it's like they pay closing fees, just a closing fee they pay. So again, but the seller nets more money, it's like if you guys, think about your real estate commission, if it's 6% or 5%. The seller pays either 5% to you or 6% to you, right, and. More money in their pocket.
Well, I wrote an offer like that, it didn't get accepted here, I think we're very, very close, but my buyers offered to pay my commission. So we didn't have to worry about the appraisal, because now, you're talking, that money is coming right from the buyers, it doesn't, and so, yeah. It was a very aggressive offer, but we still didn't get it, it was a very aggressive area, very competitive, but. The agents were very impressed, and they were anything but that. Again, Bill Boswell was on his menu of terms and strategies, but we'll pull that out, I'll pull that out of my pocket if we need to, that it's a really competitive situation, so.
All right, well, I feel like we could stay here all day, but
Yeah.
is there anything we haven't discussed that before we leave the room, did everybody find this valuable? Is there anything we missed?
That's
Excellent.
I would too, when you present your offer, if you give some facts about the buyer or qualifications, I'll call the listing agent, I'll talk to anybody. But like if their credit score 780, you can present that in your offer. It's up to you what you want to disclose that the client allows you to, you can get the permission, and just add a little bit more strength to, the offer, right? If you're just talking about credit scores, I'll speak to the listing agent, ask me to call, I'll call. I won't call unless you tell me to, but And I'll explain to them, hey, great job history, great credit, they don't have anything to sell, all the funds are their own. Credit scores are in the high 700s. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. You know, what's your full name, so I can save you my phone, so I know if you're calling on this file, you know. And I think too, guys, I really do believe the lender matters, so.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
And I'm not saying that, but you got 3 of us up there. I get calls at 7:30 at night from a listing agent reviewing the offers with their buyer. And I picked up the phone,
Mhm.
and that helps.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
can vouch for him.
Yeah.
So if you prepare me, I would look out for the call to know to answer the call.
Oh, and that's another, when we talk about value versus the bank lender to Mark,
Yeah.
the banks are only open from. On weekdays, not on weekends. I've gone out with clients, I'm like, on the weekend, I'm like, can you call? And they're like, no, the bank's closed. I'm like, this is why.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell you to go.
Yeah, and that's your value add, that could be your value
Yeah,
add. when
Cause
you
you
speak
need,
to them.
sometimes you need Mark on the weekend. Mark will pick
Yeah.
up the phone.
Unlike us. One other thing to add, gone are the days that we could have the buyer write the letter to the seller, and their situation in that. But I try to make it a little personal, and I like when I get it on my listings, where I know a little bit about the buyers, their jobs, their situation. Just to pass that information along, because some sellers would prefer a nice young couple rather than somebody knocking their home down. So if I can give them that information verbally, because maybe
Yeah.
not in writing,
Yeah,
that helps.
yeah, that's part of like making friends.
Yeah,
But I always tell
to
them.
give them the support.
Yeah.
Cool, well, thank you guys, I think this was a good collaboration. Oh, yeah, and Mark was kind enough, what do you got for us?
I think just beats it today.